Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, Janelle's back. It's been a while.
I think just a couple weeks.
Couple weeks. But hey, something happened a couple days ago that I thought, man, I think you would appreciate. So every morning we have a prayer time as a family. Mm-hmm. And in this prayer time, Janelle will often lead a lesson on something about the spiritual life. And 2 days ago, it was on the vice of gluttony and then the opposing virtue, which we talked about as moderation or mortification. And I thought, it was so good. And I thought, we just got to share it with you. So, Janelle.
Well, the interesting thing is that it's not an original idea by any means. Clearly, the virtues have been something that has been taught for like centuries. But, actually, this is the resource that we're using. It is called The Virtues for Catholic Youth. And it's by Catholic Sprouts. And I know we've shared different resources that Catholic Sprouts has provided. And we've really loved them. I've actually been following her for quite a while. But anyhow, so this book talks about every week you go through a virtue and also the opposing vice. And the way that we can combat vice is by working on the virtue, right? So gluttony is the immoderate or unreasonable pleasure in food or drink. What I really appreciated about this was that she gave some really practical examples for the kids. Like, does it mean that we shouldn't eat too much on Thanksgiving? And she goes into sharing about how food is such an integral part of our society and our culture, and how often when we celebrate, there's food around. And God has created food to be pleasing and wonderful and for good for us. And so, but it's the unbridled use of food, and when food becomes in control of you as opposed to you being in control of food.
And that's one of the key points is our food in control of us, or do we have control over it? You've likely heard this expression, we eat to live, not live to eat. And I think that's where a lot of our culture is in. We're living to eat. We have a gluttony problem within our society. Now, we do have just in general a sin problem, but think about gluttony. In the United States, 42% of people are obese. So that indicates something to us. It doesn't necessarily indicate it's a gluttony problem, but there's definitely a food problem, and there's a connection. But I think the gluttony problem, in one sense, is a little bit mitigated in our modern day culture because of the types of food that are being presented to us. First of all, how is it that 42% of people end up obese in our culture? Well, because food companies are producing food, not necessarily for nourishment, but for profit. There's something called the bliss point, where food manufacturers have this certain combination of salts and fats and sugars that when a person tastes it, it produces the most pleasurable experience, so they want more. Notice that the food companies are not trying to provide the maximum amount of nourishment. What they're trying to do is get you to come back for more and more and more. So you're hooked on the food instead of nourished by the food. Mm-hmm. For example, this. How much nourishment is in this? A lot of thought has gone into this. The bliss point. You have one chip, so that leads to another chip. They don't want you just to have one chip. They don't want you to have just the bag. They want you to have the whole bag. And then what happens? Well, then you pack on the pounds. Another example. This. How much nourishment is in this? Coca-Cola is not about feeding your body. It's about getting your money. It's not about, slimming down the waistline with this. It's about taking the pennies out of your pockets. The bliss point has been thought of when they created Coca-Cola. It's about hooking you and entertaining you, not nourishing you. That's our culture. Processed foods, all about this. Here we go. What is this one?
Hunt's thick and rich pasta sauce.
Bliss point here, friends. Processed foods. Again, it's about hooking you, not nourishing you. How can they get you to buy this again? A great combination of fats, sugars, and
convenience.
Convenience too. So this is the point. We live in a culture that's just saturated with this stuff. So this is part of the problem of obesity. But it also mitigates, I think, a little bit of the seriousness of gluttony. Not that we can get away with it, but when you're addicted to food and you're addicted to this, then the sin of gluttony is mitigated. It doesn't mean you're completely absolved from this. But we have to understand in today's society, it's different than it was 50 years ago. People are hooked. They're hooked on sugar. It's an addiction. They can't break free. And so I just wanted to set that out there as we talk about gluttony, to be aware of that. And some people really struggle with this. But then also to realize we need to bridle our passions and take back control of our taste buds instead of letting that run us.
And I think there's a bit of I don't want to say normalcy in terms of like addiction with, let's say, alcohol or drugs. And when you don't,
it's acceptable. It's an
not
accepted addiction, whereas this is like,
it's named as an addiction.
Right.
Whereas like we would never say like, oh, I've got an addiction to sugar, or I have an addiction to, or maybe we would say that, and maybe that's becoming more normalized.
20 years ago, maybe not so much.
Yeah. St. John Cashin says, food is to be taken in so far as it supports our life, but not to the extent of enslaving us to the impulses of desire.
So we're trying to teach our kids about gluttony and moderation. So this came up in the morning, right? So we're talking about it. Do you have control over what you're putting into your mouth?
Yeah.
Do you need to have more? See, gluttony doesn't allow us to be satisfied with what's on our fork because we're living for the next bite. Gluttony says, I need more than what I have. The problem is you cannot get enough of what you do not need. So gluttony prevents us actually from enjoying food.
Yeah.
Because we're like eating for the next thing, eating for the next thing, eating for the next thing. Whereas moderation allows us to enter into that moment of pleasure with proper order. It's good to experience pleasure when you're eating food. That's how God made it. But I think a lot of times we can't because we're thinking about the next bite. So that beautiful carrot cake with cream cheese icing, taking a bite, putting the fork down, and enjoying that moment instead of inhaling that whole thing and then looking for the next piece. Just something that.
Another thing that she mentions in terms of gluttony is a little bit about like the pickiness that some children or even some adults might have in terms of like, oh, they don't finish their food because they don't like it. And, you know, when it comes to wasting food, and how does that impact the person who prepared the food? Like being considerate of the one who made the food and being charitable towards that person and just eating what they've prepared for you instead of saying, you know, can I go make myself a toast with peanut butter? I get that often. And I'm like, no, you're going to eat what I made.
So our expectation is our children eat what's put before them, and that before they go on to the dessert, they finish the vegetables. What does it say if we leave the vegetables and skip over to the dessert? It means that we're allowing our taste buds to run our appetites, our passions. Shows that we don't have control. No, you have to finish it, even though it's not as pleasurable as the next thing. And that's good. That's good. And that's the discipline that we need running in our life.
And she also talked about how our appetites like to throw tantrums. You know, just like a child, when they don't get their way, they throw a little tantrum, or maybe even an adult. You know, sometimes I can tell inside of me I have these little tantrums for whatever reason. And food can really cause us to react that way, you know, when we don't necessarily get what we want, or the size of piece that we want, or
if it's not prepared in the way that we like it. It's not enough salt. How come there's not enough salt in this?
Or,
not sweet enough.
This isn't warm enough.
This isn't warm enough.
Sometimes I can just tell on the look on your face, like, he's not enjoying that.
I got to work on that.
But he still eats it.
Thank you.
Also, in terms of our appetite, like if we're only eating, if we're snacking all the time and only giving in to the things that our bellies want, then like clearly they're not going to want to eat that healthy food because we're already going to be filled up on junk food. And the interesting thing is that we're never satisfied. Like you were saying, we never are satisfied with those foods. They just don't give us the nutrition that we need. But when we do eat nutritious food, we actually can sit down and feel satisfied and content. It does so much good for our bodies.
So in terms of teaching children moderation and to mortify their senses, there has to be periods of time of eating and periods of time of not eating. Meaning that the kitchen isn't open 24 hours a day for them just to go and eat and eat. No, there's times where no food because supper is approaching. So you have your snack times and then you also have your eating times. So in the morning, we talked about 3 different ways that we can practically mortify our palate. And this comes from the spiritual writers. I get this from St. Alphonsus Liguori, who quotes St. Bonaventure, I believe. I might have got that wrong. But the 3 ways that we can mortify fast our palate is number 1, through quality, quantity, manner. Thank you. Quality, meaning that you pick the food that is maybe not quite as pleasing to you. So the quality might be, I like a lot of salt on this particular dish, so I'm going to go without it. And then there you fast or mortify yourself with the quality. You like ketchup? No, I'm going to go without ketchup on my fries because I'm going to mortify my senses a little bit. Sometimes we have to do that. So that's the quality. Then the quantity is just the amount. How much are you taking? So sometimes we take less than what we want, and that way we're mortifying, again, the palate. And manner. Manner means being done in secret. If you mortify your senses through quality and quantity, it's very easy to do in a secretive manner. And so we talked about that with the kids in the morning to teach them to mortify the palate.
It was cute. At that same day, our 8-year-old comes up to me. She's like, "Mom, I feel like I'm having or being gluttonous." I don't think she actually knew how to use the word properly, and she was just saying how I feel kind of full, but I still want to have dessert. And it was really cute. And I feel like it's good for us to be mindful of that, because often we don't temper ourselves and moderate, and check, okay, have I eaten enough,
And the other thing is this: if we can't mortify the palate, it's controlling us, then our feasting means nothing. The thing, we have flows in the spiritual life, in the liturgical life of the church. We feast sometimes, and sometimes we fast. But if we are being run by our palate, we're feasting all the time when we should be fasting. Then when it actually comes time to celebrate, we can't.
Yeah.
We miss out.
Yeah, it really robs us of the beauty that God has for us when we don't have these passions in control. So.
I think, anything else?
No, I feel like that's a little bit long.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
So, should we get rid of that munchie mix and the Coke? I'm a little bit embarrassed that he brought that out. But we have no secrets, right? So, I'm really excited about what's happening on the channel, the Catholic Minute channel, because it feels like there's a lot more content that's being put out, because there is a lot more content that's being put out, because we've hired somebody to help us out with editing, and we've been interviewing people. There's an interview that will be released soon here that I'm really excited for you to watch.
Yeah, so Janelle and I sit down with somebody together, and it's so moving.
Yeah.
So on that note, hey, if you've been blessed by our content and you would like to help us bless other people, would you consider please becoming a monthly supporter? That allows us to continue the work that we're doing, and our expenses have gone up because we have hired somebody so that we continue to reach out to a larger audience and to bless you. So if you're interested in that, or if that's a possibility, head over to canandjanelle.com. We really appreciate the consideration. So share with us below what stood out to you and why, and we will see you soon.